Hello everybody, it's Crystal. Welcome to Crystal Key. So, as we all know, the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus just came out and Apple really improved the cameras on these things. So, what exactly has changed? Well, this year, the iPhone 7, the smaller of the models, has optical image stabilization on it. And also this year, Apple made a huge leap in terms of aperture, going from an f-stop of 2.2 to 1.8. So that means we should be able to get brighter low-light pictures and also have a nice depth of field look. We have a third camera on the iPhone 7 Plus that's actually a telephoto lens, so we'll be able to zoom in without any blurriness. Also, if you're curious of how I got my phones to look like this, it's because I put some D-brand skins on them. So if you want to pick up some skins for any phone you may have in any color or texture, I'll put a link in the description for you. So let's get started. One new way the iPhone 7 enhances images is with its ability to capture high dynamic range situations very well. So here you'll see we have a pretty tough shot to get with kind of a dark foreground and with a very bright sunset sky in the background. HDR is on in both shots, and you can tell HDR on the iPhone 7 is miles better than last year's 6S. The sky looks pretty good in both, but then anything other than that is very dark with the 6S. And not only are you losing lots of details in these dark areas, like in the Rainforest Cafe sign, but the colors are just very lacking. And this is probably one of my favorite features with the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, is its ability to capture high dynamic range situations very well. Other than that, outdoor photos are very similar to one another with not many differences. And really the main differences you'll see between this generation's iPhone and the last, they come into play when you move the phone into low light. But still, there are some minor enhancements with this picture, and that's depth of field. I mean, it's hard to notice here because there's not much going on in the background, but you'll see it better in this next shot. See, in shots like this, when you have a very obvious subject in frame, it's nice to have a bit of blur going on with the background, which is called bokeh, and it really puts emphasis on the subject. Now, in a future update, Apple is going to enhance this bokeh effect even further with the dual camera setup on the 7 Plus. So if I step back with the 7 Plus and zoom in with the telephoto lens by 2 times, with this new update, I'll be able to get a shot that looks like this. But hopefully it actually looks better than my stinky Photoshop job. A lot of the time, the new iPhone 7's camera will create a warmer tint too. Not always, but sometimes. And whether that's a good or bad thing, it's mostly up to preference. Now in a shot like this, you may want a closer shot too. And the only way to do that with the iPhone 6s Plus is to zoom in digitally. So you're pretty much just expanding the picture that's already been captured when you do this, and that'll create some grainy and not so clear images. But if you have the iPhone 7 Plus model, you can use that telephoto lens to zoom in 2 times optically. So no, you're not using digital zoom, and the picture is going to be much clearer. So let's move into low light, and this is where the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus have really improved. Thanks to the higher aperture of 1.8, your photos will be significantly brighter in low light. And I didn't have the smaller iPhone 6s when taking this shot, but you could assume it would be less sharp thanks to the absence of optical image stabilization. But no matter what model you have of the iPhone 7, you'll always be able to have a longer exposure with a steady shot that optical image stabilization creates. Now, let's see how the iPhone 7 Plus's telephoto lens does here compared to digitally zooming in with the iPhone 6s Plus. And there's not too big of a difference actually, because like I said, the telephoto lens on the 7 Plus has a much smaller aperture, and on top of that, it doesn't have optical image stabilization, so in low light, the telephoto lens is pretty hit or miss. So in a lot of low light situations, you're not really going to notice any big differences between the iPhone 6s Plus and 7. I mean, the colors are ever so slightly more vibrant with the iPhone 7, which is something you can always count on in terms of differences. And the 7 has a little less grain than the 6s Plus. Let's go a little darker now, and there's even bigger differences, with the 6s Plus being much more grainy. It's also, of course, darker. But the biggest difference to me is how much more color the iPhone 7 captures. It adds just enough brightness and color to turn it into an acceptable photo. So yeah, you really have to get into extreme low light situations to see the main differences between these two phones' cameras. This Memorial had pretty much no light source lighting it up besides the lights coming from the background, and the iPhone 7 did a pretty good job at brightening the photo enough that you can read the text. It also has less noise, which helps too, and of course, like all these low light pictures, the colors are a little more vibrant with the 7. The front-facing selfie camera also has gotten some upgrades, going from the 5 megapixel shooter on the 6S to a 7 megapixel one. So that pretty much means you'll have a lot more detail, which is great for picture quality, but not so great for hiding those imperfections. So if we zoom in, you can really see this difference. You can see the individual hairs of my eyelashes and even details in my lips. When you move your selfies to lower light, the 7 and 7 Plus still outperform the 6S and 6S Plus. You get a little more brightness, but more importantly, a lot more detail as well. Zooming in really makes this obvious, but still, both are going to be pretty grainy. There's really not many obvious differences when it comes to 4K video recording. Now, because I'm not using the smaller iPhone 6S, both videos here are super smooth. The iPhone 7 is a little brighter though, which doesn't crush the dark areas as much, and I think this also makes it a little less saturated, but whether that's an improvement or not, totally up to preference. So the iPhone 7's camera really isn't a huge upgrade over the iPhone 6S Plus's camera, unless of course you're coming from the smaller iPhone 6S, because that optical image stabilization really does go a long way. But besides that, the iPhone 7 does do a better job at dynamic range, and also you get a nice bokeh effect with backgrounds, and in low light it gets a little brighter and is also a little more colorful, which is nice. But I want to know what you guys think, so drop a comment below and let me know. And also subscribe and stay tuned for the full review of these two guys over here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.